It was a warm summer evening in Austin, Texas, and the cicadas were singing their usual tune outside the porch as I stood by the kitchen window, staring at the slow-moving traffic lights on the distant road. My name is Amanda Williams, a 41-year-old woman who thought she understood everything about loyalty, love, and family. My husband, Daniel Williams, was a calm and respected man in the community, known for his honesty and patience. For years, I believed our marriage was built on a foundation of mutual trust. But what unfolded one particular weekend tested that trust in ways I never imagined. Daniel's nephew, Ethan Parker, had just turned 24 and was moving to Austin to start a new job. Since his parents lived across the country in Portland, Daniel suggested Ethan stay with us for a few days until he found an apartment. I didn't object. After all, I had known Ethan since he was a little boy who used to chase fireflies in our backyard during summer visits. He had grown into a polite, hard-working young man who always addressed me respectfully and helped around the house whenever he visited. When Ethan arrived that Friday evening, suitcase in hand and a nervous smile on his face, I felt proud of the confident young man he had become. We sat down for dinner together, sharing laughter over stories from the past. Daniel told Ethan he'd have to leave early in the morning for a 3-day business trip to Dallas, but assured him he was in good hands. I smiled and told Ethan that he was welcome to stay as long as he needed. After dinner, Daniel packed his things, kissed me goodnight, and promised to call when he reached his hotel. The next morning, the house felt strangely quiet without him. I made breakfast, pancakes, scrambled eggs, and coffee, and Ethan offered to help clean up. As we talked, I noticed he carried the same gentle warmth his uncle did, but there was something more vulnerable about him, a sense of searching for belonging. Over the next couple of days, we developed a comfortable rhythm in the house. We cooked together, fixed a few old cabinets, and even repainted the porch swing. The conversations flowed easily. He asked for advice about life, careers, and even relationships. I saw in him the same spark Daniel once had when we first met, hopeful, eager, and kind-hearted. On Saturday evening, heavy rain poured over the city, knocking out the power. The storm rumbled so loudly that it shook the window panes. I lit a few candles, and Ethan brought out a flashlight. We ended up sitting in the living room, wrapped in blankets, talking about everything from childhood dreams to favorite movies. For a moment, it felt like family again. Simple and warm. Then the phone rang. It was Daniel, his voice calm but distant. He said his trip was going well but he'd have to stay an extra night because of flight delays. I told him not to worry. He thanked me and before hanging up, asked me to make sure Ethan was comfortable and didn't feel like a guest. His exact words were, "Let him feel at home, Amanda. Treat him like family." I laughed and said, "Of course he's already part of the family." But later that night, something changed, not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, emotional sense. As the rain kept falling, Ethan opened up about how lonely he'd been since moving out of his parents' house, how he struggled with finding direction, and how he often felt unseen. I listened carefully, trying to comfort him, reminding him that every struggle was temporary. He thanked me for listening, saying I made him feel understood. His words carried a weight that lingered in the air. It wasn't romantic, it was deeply human. Two people who felt abandoned by the world finding temporary comfort in conversation. I stayed up late that night, thinking about my own life. How Daniel and I had grown apart over the years, not because of anger or betrayal, but because of silence. Sometimes emotional distance is louder than arguments. On Sunday morning, the sun broke through the gray clouds, filling the house with golden light. I made breakfast again, and Ethan joined me, cheerful and rested. We talked about plans for the future, and he promised to make something out of his life, to make his uncle proud. Later that afternoon, Daniel called to say he was heading home. I felt relief, but also confusion. Why was I feeling so emotionally stirred? That evening, when Daniel finally arrived, I greeted him at the door, hugging him tightly. Ethan smiled, thanked us both for the hospitality, and said he'd found a small apartment nearby. As he packed his things, Daniel turned to me and said, "I'm glad you two got along so well. It means a lot to me that you took care of him." I nodded, forcing a smile, but inside I felt something complicated. A mix of gratitude, sadness, and guilt for emotions I didn't fully understand. After Ethan left, the house felt emptier than before. That night, Daniel and I sat on the porch swing, watching the stars come out. He spoke softly, telling me how much he appreciated me, how he knew I always made people feel cared for. I realized then that his permission for Ethan to stay wasn't just about kindness, it was about trust. He trusted me completely, and I needed to honor that. Over the next few weeks, Ethan visited occasionally to help with small chores, and I saw him grow more confident with his new life. We maintained a respectful bond, one shaped by understanding and lessons learned. I realized that sometimes life puts people in emotional crossroads, not to test love, but to remind us of its fragility. I loved Daniel more than ever because I understood how much he trusted me with something precious. Ethan became like a younger friend, a reminder that kindness could heal loneliness without crossing boundaries. Months later, Daniel and I went to visit Ethan at his new place. He had decorated it beautifully, with photos of his parents, his uncle, and even one of all three of us on the porch that rainy night. As I looked at it, I felt peace. The memory of that weekend was no longer confusing. It was simply part of our shared human experience. Sometimes, emotional storms cleanse our hearts the way rain refreshes the earth. And though that weekend had begun with uncertainty, it ended with renewal, of trust, of compassion, and of what it truly means to love unconditionally. Life moved forward gently, teaching me that betrayal doesn't always come from broken promises. It comes from not understanding what trust really means. And when trust is tested but survives, it becomes unshakable.